Hi guys, get this knocked off there. Hope you're all well. It's a mechanic from Tracy Thompson Racing here. No introductions needed now, I suppose. Seen a couple of videos, household name really. Anyway, Tracy's asked me to do another video on the suspension. How we get to our ride heights, how we set our corner weights up. It gets a bit detailed, doesn't it? And I did explain to Tracy that we sort of be giving our race secrets away if we start explaining this stuff, at which Tracy burst into laughter and just said, just go make the video. So, let's do this video. Why do we do our corner weights? Where do we start? Why do we do what we do? Long story really. So, what we'll do, we'll have a quick start off. The front end of our car, we run the Mini Spares rubber donut. It's a red dot if I remember rightly, which replaces the old Rover unit, which as you can see, and this is one of the better front ones, compress quite a bit with time and you start losing any spring rate at all. So we change these for the Mini Spares type, which give us a much better spring rate. It's much more controllable. In old times when we used this rubber previously, we used a competition bump stop on the top arm and we allowed the bump stop to contact the subframe to help with a bit more suspension. Obviously not ideal and it damages the subframe. Regulations changed and we were allowed to move over to the Mini Spares type and meant we can bin this Rover type off. Now we've retained the Rover type on the rear of the car, just new ones, not new copy ones but new OE rubbers on the back, because we don't want to be over stiff. We do find they're a bit softer, and for the rear there's no weight in the car, so the amount of spring rate we need is dramatically different to the front, so we find the work on the back. So we're on the Mini Spares on the front and the Rover on the back. Now the problem is, as we discussed before, the Mini Spares type is a much bigger donut. So then we have to chop down the cone, the aluminium cone. We have to take a percentage off that. We took 10mm off ours and that allowed us to get the adjustments down to the ride heights which we need. Now that's bringing us into what we want to be talking about, which is our ride heights and why we set up the front of the car before we set the back of the car up. So, our ride heights. Now, I know a lot of people like to drop the cars, just slam the cars, and that's great, it gives a great look, but obviously in racing we're looking for performance, so we're looking for an extra edge, that extra little bit. So when we come to set the cars up, our ride heights are determined by the bottom arm. This is an old one out of the back shed just for demonstration purposes. So it's the bottom arm with a tie bar fitted to it. If you can imagine, this end here sits in the subframe, and at the opposite end here, this is where your ball joint will be. So if we have this fitted to the car and we lower the car so this bar, its centres are parallel with the ground, that gives us our maximum negative camber. So that's actually made this bar longer than it would be if it was, say, down here. So we move it up to parallel with the ground and it becomes longer, so it improves our negative camber figure, which is great while we're static. But obviously cars aren't static for very long, they tend to move around. So if we had it parallel, when our suspension compresses, we'll then be going the other way, and in the corner we'll actually be taking off negative camber and putting on positive, which is obviously the worst place we want that to happen, is in mid corner, because then we're just going to understeer. So instead of running parallel, we keep a value which we've determined to be our maximum travel under normal race conditions. So this, we set it with it below parallel So when it's compressing in a corner, oops, we actually gain negative camber. So we've adjusted out to say we have a value of 2.5, and then in compression in the corner that value will go up as opposed to going down if we'd set that bar parallel. So we start at the front, and our main aim is to get the position of this bar. That is our main aim. Once we get the position of that bar, we can work from there. So we more or less already know what our ride heights are within. So like I say, we have regulation ride outs we have to adhere to. Have a quick look under the car. You can see there we've set a string line out, so our floors aren't level here, so we've levelled our turn plates, and we run a string line from turn plate to turn plate, same along the side for getting our ride height. So what we do, we take a measure from this string line to what we have as a centre line for our bottom arm. And then we take a measure from here, and we make sure that measure in static is a distance that we believe our suspension will compress, so it doesn't go into a negative value. Well, it'd be more of a positive value, but it's a negative for us. So once we've got that, once we know where these bars sit, we can then start working our corner weight. So we want to know we're pretty even off the front at this point. So once we know we're pretty even, we're not going to get fully even because there's work to do off the back. You've got to adjust these on the diagonal corner weights. You can't just adjust from axle to axle, it's across the diagonal, that's where you get your adjustments. So we've brought our corner weights pretty much roughly on the front, and we know our ride heights are pretty much roughly. It does help having done quite a few times before. So and then we'll move to the back. Now this time our rears were actually higher than we wanted them, and we knew that because the driver had lost quite a bit of weight, so the car had risen up and there's a bit more ride height. So we were resetting to that value really, so we knew that they had to come down. So once we got the front somewhere where we wanted it, we'd come to the back, measure the front, and we'll sit down, we'll work out where's our best diagonals to move the weight, and then we'll go from there. While we're doing this, we've also got to remember we want an amount of rake. Now the amount of rake isn't really, we'll measure it off the sill line, but that wouldn't really be important. What would be important would be the weight, the way the weight's transferred. So we'll say, we'll keep it to rake for now, so we'll run not quite an inch, we're more like 20-22 mil of rake. The reason why we run this rake is because the weights dictate that's where our rake needs to be, because we don't want under acceleration or out of a corner, any corner, we don't want weight transfer over to the back. We want to keep the weight at the front of the car, so we have a nice percentage of rake, so this lesser value of weight is easier transferred to the front. We don't want to transfer it to the back, or that would be taking weight off our front wheels, and obviously we don't want that. We want to keep that weight on them wheels and keep them wheels pinned to the tarmac. So we'll get the backs, we'll set the backs up, and we get pretty close. And we'll run to the fronts again, we'll check over the fronts, and it's only a couple of goes round, and it's pretty straightforward really. With a camber gauge it is a bit hit or miss. If you've got scales it's much better, it's a lot easier to do. So what we'll do, we're pretty close, we're like something like 59-41% or something like that if you work out on paper where our split is. And this really seems to work for us. Have a look at this here. This is a wet race from Thruxton a couple of years ago. The car, beautiful handling car in the wet, really neutral, really controllable. It tells you when it's going to do something, and it gives you so much time to react to it. It actually makes our driver look like a good driver. So we pretty much think this system works. We're always open to learning new things, always open to learning new things. So if anyone has any other comments or anything that they want to pass on, please do, because you know, you never know everything. even if you think you do, you never know everything. So with our rear set, our front set, we then have our camber and caster to look at. So what we'll do, we'll set at about 2.5 neg, and we've got about 8 degrees of caster. Now what happens then, when we turn into a corner, instead of our camber reducing and just starting rolling onto the outside of the tyre, because the amount of caster we run, with over half a turn on the steering wheel, our neg camber has gone up just over a degree. So with the small amount of body roll we get, we've allowed for no decrease in camber through our bottom arm. This figure hopefully should average itself out with the body roll, with the tyre squash, and we're hoping around 3 degrees it would average itself out with these other factors into account, which should keep us, we're hoping, in the middle of the tyre. We've only learnt this years and years and years and years and years of fiddling about track time, there's a lot of equipment out there, tyre pyrometers, you know, stuff where you can actually read temperatures of tyres, learn where the tyre's getting hot, where it's not getting hot, adjust suspension too. But with years, this is what we've come up to, and we seem to get the cars working pretty well. I wouldn't like to think I was doing it to someone else's car though, you know. It's too time consuming, and yeah, it's a nice hobby, but it wouldn't be a nice job. So much pressure, I think. Leave that to the professionals. Anyway, I'm hoping that that's answered enough. If there's any more questions on how we set things up or why we set things up in a certain way, please ask us. We will do one. We had another question on valve train, so just regarding valve lift, we will be doing another one on valve lift. We'll get the dial gauge out, run through the process of showing how much valve lift you have, and why we shim the 1.5 rockers to the values we do. Right guys, I hope that's been informative. I hope I haven't dribbled on for too long. You have yourself a great day. See you later. Bye.